Tuesday night, January 6th, meeting of Blanc Township, or the Committee of the Whole meeting for the Township of Blanc. And I'd like to call this meeting to order and start with the approval of the agenda.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Agenda items passed as started, and now going through public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to comment at this time? Then we'll go to the Thursday night review of the agenda. We'll be starting off with the swearing of Fire Chief David Cervetter. We also have two presentations to make. I'd like to add those in for Thursday night. We have a new assignment to the McFarland Board, the Library Board, Mr. Craig Withers, and we also have recognition to Tanya Wendt, who has been a part-time dispatcher with us for 30 years. And we will also be recognizing Gary Gratch, who is a retiring member of the McFarland Library Board that's been on the board for almost 20 years.
Okay, what did you say his name is? What is his name?
Gary Gratch, Gratch. Okay, and then we will have the usual approval of the minutes, the treasurer's report, and we have no unfinished business at that time, so we'll go on to new business, which would be the consideration of the adoption of the second reading of the sewer system capital fee and usage charges ordinance. We've already had the first reading. The proposed increase is at $11.34 to $12.24 per REU, which is a 90% increase. Then secondly would be considering the adoption of the second. Is there any question on that?
No.
Okay. Then we'd be considering the adoption of the second reading of the water system capital fee and usage charges ordinance, and the proposed increase there is $10.50 to $11 per meter, a 50-cent increase. Then we will be considering a request from the successor developer of Trillium for an amendment to the Trillium PUD agreement regarding signs. We're going to hear about that right now. Would you give us your presentation?
Sure. I wasn't expecting to be up so quick, but that's great. Well, I'm Nick Trefon. I'm with Signs by Crane, and it's spelled Trifon, my last name. And I'm here to talk about our request. Obviously, the original developer of this project is not the person who currently owns. Mark Murphy's the current owner, and the project, I believe, didn't go together quite as planned. So there's been some changes that we want to make to the signage as part of that. I know this PUD has been compared to Heritage Park, and one of the things that, and I'm a Grand Running resident myself, so I'm familiar with both developments. What we got with Heritage Park is a development that was developed almost completely from day one. I mean, they built all the retail locations. They built the Walmart and the Sam's. They built all the other stores, and then they sold spaces and rented it out to tenants. But I think they were pretty much ready to go from day one. So they put two signs. With Trillium Center, you've got a project that's kind of evolving, and it's not as clear cut. Even there's a lot of frontage. I estimated there's about 2,000 plus linear foot of frontage between on this development, and it's almost divided into. You've got a small section In the middle, I think there's a hair salon and some other properties. And so it's not almost, it doesn't give you a feel of a continuous development. So I think initially the idea was that you would have a sign that would say, this is the Trillium Center, and then people would know where they'd go, and then they'd take this service road, which doesn't really feel like a road, it just feels like a drive, more or less, that you can go through there, and it's kind of broken up. You don't get the feel that the Trillium Theater is part of the Merrill Lynch project that's a little bit further down. And this project, if you look at the original PUD, and you see what the plans were to develop, isn't nearly 50% to where it was planned to be, right? If you look at where the Merrill Lynch building is, there's 4 other buildings that were kind of planned as part of that PUD. And if you look at, how it's coming together, the other part of the retail portion of it, you've got Bagger Dave's, you've got Froyo, it's just kind of coming together. And obviously they want to do a whole lot more there. Well, one of the things, currently they've got a credit union that's going in. And the credit union wants a sign at the road. They want to be able to let drivers by know that they're going into this location. And so that flexibility for tenants and to promote the property, that's one of the reasons why we're requesting to put tenants towards the road. Now, the way this project is developing, the way I see it, is not quite like a PUD like you would want to develop. You want it to kind of come together all as originally planned. And this isn't it's coming together more like individual businesses are kind of moving in there. And if this were to, say, go by the general ordinance, the signage ordinance of the township, is the direction that we're kind of asking for. We're asking the signs that we've proposed, and I don't know if you have them in front of you, I've made copies of those. Would you like to see
I
them?
will.
Okay, let me give you.
Section 1, 2, 3, and 4, is that?
Yeah, but here's the design. And this design was planned in such a way that it meets the guidelines of the ordinance as it's going to, I think there's some revisions to the ordinance. The copy is 8 inches tall and that's done for readability from a traffic standpoint. You want the copy to be large enough so that people are able to make out. And as you can see, the first name on there is Lake Michigan Credit Union. Oh, okay, great. And, oh, great. So you've got a credit union that just moved in down the street, and they broke off from the PUD, and I guess they were able to do a monument sign and all the things that a credit union would want to have at this development. So the Lake Michigan Credit Union, who's moving in as a tenant, they also want a sign. They also want some representation at the road, and that's, so as we have tenants moving in there, we feel like there's going to be that need of some of them to have some, identification at the road. So this design, if you look at it, 6 feet high is per the township guidelines. The square footage, the 74.67 square, is within the guidelines of the ordinance as well. So, these things that we've done were designed in a way to meet the guidelines, as if this was a development that each building, each thing is coming in on its own to meet the guidelines of the ordinance. We've decided to kind of work down. We actually had a larger sign in mind, a taller one. And if you look at the project across the street, what is it, Galleria Center? Grand Ridge. They have individual tenants with their names on there as well, but for each. And I understand that's not a PUD, but that development is kind of the direction that we're going with here as well. And if you look at it, the linear footage of the thing, the ordinance states that for business centers, you can have up to 2 signs for every 250 feet of linear frontage with a maximum of 2. The way this is like 2,000 linear feet of frontage along Holly Road. And so, we were asking for 4. We've kind of figured that we might be able to get down to 3, but we need the signs for future growth. And, like I said, some of the tenants that would be moving in, if you look at the original PUD and as it moves forward, some of the tenant spaces don't even face Holly Road. So having a wall sign doesn't necessarily help them because people will notice them. So having some signage at the road is definitely beneficial for that purpose. I got Gary Gephardt. He just stepped in here. He's with Signs by Craney too. I don't know if he has anything you want to add to what I was saying here, but.
No, I think you've kind of covered it. It's a very expansive development that's going on there, and there's a lot of frontage. And these aren't big signs, so they're going to be a long ways apart. And so I think it's within keeping in the spirit of the code not to have obtrusive signs in the township here.
All right. And I think the other important thing too, I kind of mentioned it earlier, was the fact that this doesn't give you the feel, but because it's spread out the way it is, you don't, when you're driving down Holly Road, you don't get the feeling that the Trillium Theater and the Merrill Lynch building are part of the same development, same park. So, putting that sign out there and saying just, go to Trillium Center is not beneficial in that respect. So having the tenants' names at the road is much more helpful to them, and it's going to help this project grow and get more development into that area.
Okay.
Any questions?
Well, I just have one remark, and that is the reason, one of the reasons that you wouldn't consider it is because they insist on putting the for sale sign on Merrill Lynch's property in about 12 feet, so it looks like the Merrill Lynch building is for sale instead of being a part of the PUD.
Well, I'm not familiar with that sign, sorry.
Well, I'm just saying it annoys me every time I pass by it, so.
Oh, okay, there's a for sale sign there, is that
Yes.
for the property or
For
something?
the property, for
I
the
thought it was for
PUD.
the Merrill Lynch building.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, from my understanding, I don't believe that property is, that.
Yeah, I understand it's not your problem, but I'm saying that's one of the things that disconnects it, because it looks like there's a sign, a big building right there that's for sale.
Yeah.
Instead of putting a for sale sign centered on the vacant lot.
Yeah, instead of,
Parking, yeah.
even to the property line would make a difference.
Right. So you've got that property that's kind of in the middle, that's really not even part of that, the Trillium Center, Trillium Circle.
My question, I'm sorry, I have another question. Where is this Lake Michigan Credit Union supposed to be going?
Well, it's going into the Merrill Lynch building. Good. And it's going to go on the right-hand side of the building.
So it's in the existing building?
It's going to be in the existing building, yeah. And there's plans, obviously, to build more buildings, but if you're familiar with this project at all, there's more tenant spaces on the back side of that building that have to be occupied and sold. So there's a lot of future, development. Plus, as I was saying, there's another additional 4 buildings that were planned as part of the original PUD. And, like many PUDs, or unlike many PUDs, this isn't coming together like the Trillium Center, which I said, it was built all at one time. It was planned, this is needing some flexibility in that respect.
I have a clarification.
Yeah.
On this schematic here, is this building on the end, is that?
No, it's actually the Merrill Lynch building is to the left of the driveway. So if you go up the driveway, it would be the furthest left building.
Okay, right there. Okay.
So how is a sign on Industrial Drive going to indicate where the credit union is? I'd be lost going through.
Well, we're looking at doing I got a site plan here that shows, we're looking at doing, the first sign would be location number 3 on this drawing here. It would be right there, yeah. Oh, you've got popcorn copies. So the first sign we're going to be doing is this one.
Location 4.
Location 3.
Yeah, but location 4 is a different credit union, it has its own sign.
Mhm.
And it was, I think it was segregated out, it's not even part of the PUD anymore.
Mhm.
So, number 4 isn't even part of the PUD, so that doesn't even work. You right?
Comments on that one?
The,
Yeah.
I believe you're talking about the driveway that's adjacent to Security Credit Union. Is that what you're speaking to?
Yeah.
There's buildings planned to be in the back, and that drive is supposed to continue on to the back. And I know that my understanding is that the Colony Market building is going to be torn down out of there when that gets sold into that area. So at the moment, he's not wanting to put up all the signs at this very moment. He's wanting to get started on this and get it approved and get the sign out primarily in front of the Merrill Lynch building, if you will, because the Lake Michigan Credit Union is going to take up 5,000 square feet of the bottom. He's waiting for the architect's plans to come back on that. That's, my understanding is expected to happen in the spring. That was part of the lease agreement. They said, we're not going to move in there unless we can get a sign out front. And so something was worked into the lease agreement. He thought that things have, Mark Murphy, thought things have been changed with Keith, with the township here, to be able to put up a ton of signs. There was a meeting in January of 2014 regarding a multi-tenant sign and how that area was going to be calculated. But what Mark didn't realize is Keith was saying, hey, I understand what you want to do. We can go forward with this, but you need to take and get the PUD itself changed. So Mark had a little bit of a misunderstanding of what he was allowed to do. He thought that meeting was, hey, we've got this squared away, and it wasn't. Which kind of brings us to where we're at today. But he's wanting to start with getting the sign over there, as you're facing the building, and be on the right side of the driveway into the Merrill Lynch building. And then the next driveway back, we realized that property there, 8040 Holly Road, the Security Credit Union, is out of the PUD at this point, but there's a driveway right there that he wants to be able to put a sign at down the road. And then he would like to be able to do something between the Merrill Lynch building and where the traffic light is over there, where you pull into the, typically pull into the theater. I don't know if I'm making good sense or not on that, with what they're asking for.
I'm going to comment on that. I understand it's not you. I appreciate your presentation, what you're saying, but I remember the discussion we had about the sign for the credit union, and the credit union was here, and the developer for the PUD was here. We're going to separate that out. It's not going to be part of it. It's going to be disconnected, which is why we agreed to allow that separate sign. And now we're here, and he wants to actually put another sign up here on that location and extend that driveway back into the PUD again. Kind of goes exactly against what we
I
were
don't
told.
think Mark was the owner at that point.
Now, that may not be. I don't remember
It's
the name.
exchanged.
He
It was
was.
only a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't that long
The
ago.
He was
Security credit
the owner, yes.
Was he?
Yeah,
Okay.
Guaranteed.
So we agreed to allow Security Federal their own sign, as we also disconnected it from the PUD and made it an individual lot. So
Okay.
I like it when the story stays the same. So, and again, I understand that that's not you, so,
Mhm.
Okay.
One of the things we did talk about with Mark was that we may not be able to do 4. And so Mark he's agreeable to, do only 3. And I think if you look at this project, if we lifted the PUD off of it and it was just 5 or 6 buildings that were being built and we wanted to do our signs, we would be within the ordinance guidelines with our request. And so in that, keeping that in mind, I think, a lot of times these PUDs, I know there were give and take, as far as what's negotiated and stuff. I've seen PUDs where there's a lot more signage that's granted because of the development, because they want the additional revenue that, development might bring in. In this case, we would, if we reverted back to just the ordinance, I think we would be okay with the mandated signs that we're proposing.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
can I make a comment?
yes,
That isn't, I understand their point, but that's not what we have here.
no.
We specifically have a negotiated planning and development that we negotiated with the original developers. We created a binder of terms and agreements that we both agreed to live by. and you're coming here asking to change that agreement. You can't have it both ways. You don't get to be a part of a PUD that's negotiated with give and take, and then revert back to the ordinance when you want to do that. So, this is a PUD, you make the decision on this if you want to agree to the amendment, but it's not an ordinary request. That's why it's not from the planning commission or the ZBA. Just want to clarify that.
This is just not for discussion, right? This is a Thursday thing, or is this?
That's for Thursday.
Yeah. Just a few comments by me, Madam Chair. This is one area of our township that I hope becomes a shining example of what, why we live in Grand Blanc and what we want to have in our county looked at as, hey, that's a great area to go to. And we've got one chance to get it right, one shot at it. And I know a lot of thought was put into how this was planned out and the agreement with PUD. I'm cognizant that, we've had a very difficult economy the last several years after this was first started, and it's probably slowed the development a little bit of it. But I really have a tough time just amending something like this without careful consideration on, the forethought that went into this. And to be honest, I really don't care for the look of the sign in keeping with that area. I really like that area to be something really classy.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that is the kind of look that I would, personally want. That's just me. But anyways, I would really have to study this thing closely before I would vote to amend the PUD.
Maybe, Madam Chair, maybe with some information from Clear Zoning.
Yeah, that's what I was just going
Clarify
to
some of
suggest.
the thoughts.
Yeah. If there's no other comments, we'll just go on.
Just wait for them to finish.
All right, thank you.
Can I make one last point? I'm from the Grand Blanc area too. The Grand Ridge sign, which they're beautiful signs, and they have the tenant names on there. And that's, I think, you could agree that's something that really looks nice in that area. It's a different aesthetics, and sometimes that's, but that's kind of the thing that we want to be, that's the benefit that Grand Ridge realizes from having the tenant names out there, and the tenants realize that benefit, and that helps them all out. That'll help also sell and get that development moving, is to be able to have a business say, I can have a sign out on Holly Road too, so I'll move out there because I want that advertisement. It is a benefit. It is definitely a benefit to have a sign at the road, and that's why most companies and businesses want that or need that to survive. So that will help. Anyways, that's my
Okay.
5 cents. Thanks.
Good evening.
Hi.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
So a lot of the comments that we've been hearing so far are really things that we've been suggesting to in our letter, and I think as well the last time that we were here talking about this development, and that's that going back to the history, as was mentioned, when this was created in 2005, it was intended to be a very unique, special shopping area for the township. And because of the economy and because of a variety of other factors, I'm sure that that's not exactly how things have turned out. And so we recognize that the developer, the current property owner, is trying to make improvements, is trying to do his best to complete the development. And yet, we were here a while ago, a year ago, with the credit union issue, and now we've come back again with another sign issue. And our feeling is, and I think in conjunction with what Mr. Laddie was saying, that we would like to see a bigger picture look at this. And the property owner may or may not know that at this point, and as we've been trying to work with him over the last several months and suggest that really what you need to do is please provide what is your overall vision for this development. Are you intending to essentially complete the PUD as was designed, and we have that book that Mr. Leddy referenced here too, the development agreement? Or are there other changes that are going to be proposed as we go down the line? And if that's the case, which it sounds like there may be, is what we're doing here by amending this agreement to allow these signs going to be in keeping with those plans that may happen in the future? So I think that's our overall recommendation. I think specific to the signs, we appreciate Nick's work with the sign design in terms of there was an original proposal where the signs were much bigger, and Nick's worked to make that try to be more in keeping with the current sign regulations. You know, you just adopted some new sign standards, and this does meet those requirements in terms of the height, the sign area. I incorrectly noted that it was 83 square feet in my review, and in further discussions with Nick, and he was explaining to me that the gaps in between those panels is in fact open. And so when we subtract that out, and that's part of our new sign regulations, it does bring it into the compliance with the 75 square foot maximum. So those are, I think that's sort of like the lower level. I think we weren't exactly clear. I think that the sign is wood, based on the images and the discussions that we've had, but I think should the board wish to explore more about this sign, I think maybe focusing more on the materials might be a good idea. If there is a way that we could capture the essence of the development, Grand Ridge was referenced across the street, and that sign, although it's larger, it doesn't comply with current ordinance standards, so it's non-conforming, is very much part of that center. And so it complements those buildings in a way that I'm not sure that the current design, Mr. Bennett maybe was trying to grasp, doesn't quite. So if there's a way that the township board wants to explore that in a little bit more detail, perhaps it's something that the applicant would be willing to do as well. And any changes that are made should be in the format of the text that we have in terms of amending the agreement that we have. So we didn't have that with the submittal, but we would anticipate that any changes would be made in that way. So I'll be glad to answer any other questions that you might have for me.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had a question. This one's indicating loom. I think the original agreement said it was supposed to be brick and mortar, and it was only supposed to be the Trillium sign and no tenants, because the tenant signs were supposed to be on the buildings.
Correct.
And of course, and the whole complex, there's no connecting road whatsoever. They're all independent at this point because they never finished the road, right? And it was limited to 2 signs, I believe, right?
It is. It's limited to 2 signs, and you're correct. They were intended to simply identify the development as a whole, like Heritage
Right.
Park does.
Right.
Yeah.
And those signs the Heritage Park signs are smaller
Right.
even, but that's where, if you say I'm in Heritage Park, that's where they are.
Right, and Heritage
They're
Park
in Heritage
has,
Park, or-
Heritage Park has far more locations than this total pop is going to
Right.
have. So everybody in that park has nothing on the road, either York Highway or on Saginaw Road. But that's part of the PUD problem. That's part of the PUD issue, right?
Right, and so that would be I think the intent originally, the original concept was that when you were in business, you would say, well, we're a Trillium Circle.
Right.
And that would be the identifier that you would need, not relying as much on the drive-by necessarily as just a destination.
Right.
And that's, with the movie theater there, that was, I think, a good concept.
Mhm.
That you have some of the restaurants, you have the movie theater there as your anchor, your destination, and while people are there, then they're seeing what else is there. Similar to a number of other types of newer developments where we don't list all the businesses out individually, but we refer to them collectively.
In the original contract, it indicated 2 signs. Was it set in stone where those 2 signs are supposed to be, or was it?
I think it did. In fact, I have that right here.
There's a similar type setup north of Lansing on 127, the outdoor
Oh,
mall.
yeah.
But, I don't know, there isn't like Lansing Road, is it? I don't think it's like Lansing, but it's a similar type outside mall where you have similar setup to this, to be honest with you. I wouldn't give a theater.
Right.
The signage on the road is pretty limited.
We realize that it's hard to develop a concept like this from out of state, especially California, and so that but I agree with you that I would like to see a whole concept rather than building by building.
To answer the question about where the signs were, 2 monument signs on Holly Road were permitted, and then 1 additional wall sign was supposed to be at the gardens in the fountain area facing Holly Road. And they were just to say Trillium.
But where were the 2 Trillium signs? One was, where were they at on Holly Road? Was it specified? Does it matter, or was it specified? The big one was in front of the gardens, right?
Necessarily.
Yeah, I don't remember again.
I don't think it was.
Right. The biggest one was where the gardens and the falls, that's where the big
Yeah.
sign was gonna be, which would be the big draw. And then by one of the roads, or 2 of the roads, they'd probably just drop it in, probably at the one end where it connects from the credit union all the way down, and probably at the other end, right? And the middle one was the big spread with the waterfall, and the gardens and all that stuff, which isn't there, right?
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Me?
yeah.
I'm conflicted by this because as a consumer, I like to see what I'm looking for. You know, if you don't, Trillium Circle's kind of a big area, so I like the idea of signs. The other thing I'm conflicted about is like I appreciate that our planners have more insight than I do to it, so it's like, I sympathize with you guys, I sympathize with you big. I used to have a business, and if you don't have a sign, you don't have a business. You know, some, like the theater, people are gonna go to it, they're gonna find that fast, be there one time and know where it is. But a credit union, or a little place that doesn't get a lot of people, or repeat people, I mean, I don't know, I'm gonna lean toward your advice and the people on the planning commission, but I wish that there would be a way that it could be worked out so that they can advertise with a sign. And I realize I'm different than most people in the township because I love signs. I love flashing signs, I love neon signs, I'm serious, I love them. I love a big sign.
The Vegas Strip is your home.
I love Vegas, yeah.
Well, and I would say too,
Go ahead.
just because I don't want to forget, I think that that suggesting that there be a bigger picture view of this would necessarily preclude a multi-tenant sign at some point. I think what we were suggesting is that really though looking at it from a whole might be better, at least to start with, so that everybody's on the same page with what we're going to be looking at in the future.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say something similar to Chris. The sign itself, I like the idea of having sign, out front to say what is there. But I would think we would want something more higher end than what was depicted here. From my personal perspective on this. So, I mean, that's where I would be.
Yeah, and I think that, now that you talked to the design of it, I think that what they were trying to do is fit the most amount of signage they could within the requirements of the ordinance. By making the letters really as small as they could, but still meeting our new requirement that they be 8 inches high, and then keeping it to 6 feet in the same area, so.
I would like to say something on that design, because, there's a lot of different opinions. I think part of the disconnect is Mark is from the West Coast, and that look is something you would see more on the West Coast. And I don't think it's hard to argue that this development's kind of coming together more of a hodgepodge, not like the Heritage Park development. I mean, Heritage Park, the red brick buildings, there's uniformity in the development. You look at what's going on at Trillium Circle, you've got Bagger Dave's, which is kind of a rustic looking building. You got the Trillium Theater, which is ultra modern kind of looking. You got Buffalo Wild Wings, which is kind of more of a traditional building. You got Merrill Lynch, again, ultra kind of modern looking building. It's kind of a hodgepodge of designs. And I think, and Mark's not here, but I think, he's talking about creative office space and doing some things that, like I said, you probably would, if you've been like to the west coast of Portland, you'd see some of these kinds of designs more. And it's a different field than I'm used to, you know, and, you know, you can ask 10 people and, you know, 6 people might not like the design and 4 people might like it, and, you know, and it doesn't show. One of the things me and Gary were talking about is maybe going back to Mark, suggesting maybe a higher end type looking sign. We've played around with some ideas, and here's one other idea that we had, you know, that we thought, you know, it fits, it's more of a piece that fits the ultra modern and the rustic kind of, you know, and of course that can even be altered, that design, you know, and I think we have 2 pieces here. We have the aesthetic piece, which I'm for. Like, I want the development to look good. I want my signs to look. I want people to go there and say, hey, you know what? That's a beautiful looking sign. You know, I think when people see the Galleria sign, I don't think, you know, sitting here that people would say that's an ugly sign that deters from the area. I think those signs are beautiful, and they have tenant spaces on there. That's the kind of thing that we want to develop for Mark. So if it means that we have to, you know, go back to him and, you know, try to work through, you know, his vision and get, you know, give you guys some options to choose from, where I think we're willing to do that, you know, versus saying, you know what, here's our design, you guys don't like the design, and we're stuck on the aesthetics part. We need to get the tenant spaces on there.
How fast do you think Mark can get back to Jill with the plan, with the whole plan? Because really, that's the best option for the township.
I think, and I don't want to speak for Mark, because he's not, but I think part of this whole thing is there's going to be, as the development grows, I don't think it's going to be, like, I don't know that you're going to have a consistent development like you have with Heritage Park. I think it's going to come together in pieces versus as one big thing, where here's the plan, and we're going to build 4 more buildings, and they're going to look exactly like this.
But we've got to have a concept, okay?
My concern is, you know, you mentioned it being a hodgepodge. My hope is that our planning commission's been approving things that are part of the overall plan and not
Yeah.
making it a hodgepodge, even if it is coming together in pieces. I don't want it to be a hodgepodge of
We have, you
different
know, we
styles
have
of
a
building.
PUD set, and we need to know what is going to be there. Is he going to follow this? If he's going to, wants it changed, how is he going to change it? There's no specifics here.
Madam Chair, I have an idea for you. One of the processes in your ordinance is if you find that there's a change to the concept of PUD, you can refer it back to the planning commission for development. It sounds to me like that's what clear zoning is recommending. If in fact, if the concept's going to change and if things need to turn outward as opposed to inward, it isn't going to be just a matter of a couple signs placed in certain spots. If we've got a change in the concept, send it back to the planning commission
Yeah.
and have them break it down and have them meet with the property owner and figure out what direction they're headed and how we can help.
Yes.
Yeah, the problem I have is we have the other PUD, which is Heritage Park. It has more tenants than this one ever has. None of those people have a sign on either road. And if we change this to allow all these tenant signs to be there, they're gonna wanna have tenant signs, and then it's gonna look like who knows what. So that's the whole reason it's a PUD, and there's no tenant signs, it's just the image. If you have the garden sign out there, the way it was predicted originally, you wouldn't need any other sign. You'd say, go to that garden sign, you can't miss it, and your store is in there. The theater's there, every store's in there. Like, you can go to that pizza place that's in the one that's where Myers is, not Myers, but Walmart is. There's no sign, but everybody knows it's there because it's in that complex. And if you built that garden center sign, that's all the sign you're gonna need.
Oh, you remember the old mall signs that we had around town, the old malls?
Yeah.
Yeah, the concept was to have a sign, you know, it's 100 feet in
Gigantic
the air,
pole sign,
and
yeah.
then list every single
Yeah.
business that's in there. We could do those, you know, but I don't think that's the look we were.
No, I don't either.
I got a couple comments I want to this. And I came to this with an open mind because I wanted to hear the proposal before I made a mind. What I don't want is something to look like Linden Road. If you drive up Linden Road, like towards Corona and Calkins, all that, I mean, it's terrible. And you have to look around the sign to read the next sign, you know? And as you were talking, Chris, and not to pick on you, just to kind of brought up a memory, or kind of, you were talking about, you know, business needs a sign, you know, people gotta see it from the road. Baskin and Robbins, it's in the city, but it's been in that mall for 40 years.
Is it closed?
They just closed.
The other day and it's
And we were
closed.
in there, I think on a Thursday night or something like that, and I saw a sign taped to the door that said, you know, Saturday or Friday. So I said, well, why are you closing? She said, well, we just don't have the business we used to have. Ever since they built that Aubrey's Pizzeria, nobody knows we're here anymore. And I thought to myself, okay, this mall's been here for 40 years, you've been part of it. And before that pizzeria, there was a boarded up gas station for 40 years. I don't think Aubrey's Pizzeria is going to closing. And it's the same kind of concept. Froyo yogurt, maybe Froyo, which is in this PUD,
Yeah.
had part of Baskin Robbins' demise. I don't know, but every time I drive by Froyo,
Yeah.
they're packed. They have no sign on the road. You can't see them unless you're at the movie theater. They're packed.
I don't know if they have a sign on their building.
They have one on the building, and it faces the back.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, with the Heritage Park, so I go there all the time, you know, I'm a Walmart shopper. But, you know, the development that's there, the Walmart and Sam's, drives a lot of traffic up through there. The traffic that those businesses generate really push those other places.
Feeds the other
Yeah,
places.
and the drive is actually more like it's like a road. With Trillium Circle, the way, I don't know if you've driven, I mean, I don't like to drive through there. It's not a very, I mean, you're gonna pull in and pull out, you know, so you're not getting that through traffic.
Well,
that
the road's-
you-
I think the road's supposed to be there, but they never built it, right? Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
they found their way to Dagger Days very easily. So, anyway, yeah,
And that's nice, I mean, it's a nice
yeah.
thing, but I don't think that was part of the original.
And that was gonna be one of my comments is, why don't you talk to the gentleman, have him at least put in the roads, and that way we would be able to better conceptualize and see where these monument signs should go. Because at least that would say that he's interested in finishing this.
Yeah,
And following the original.
Yeah.
as
Madam
Scott,
Chair, yeah, I'd just like to ask Ms. Bain what her recommendation would be. Mine would be to have the planning commission look at this and maybe have their firm sit down with the developer and figure out what the plan is for the future. Because I don't really want it to be a hodgepodge. I want,
No.
even though it comes together in pieces, I'd like to have some uniformity to the look and you know, follow, you know, if we decide that we want to change the plan, then let's all decide, let's change the plan, including the developer. If more signage, then let's, you know, figure out what
Yeah.
works. But to sit here and try and decide whether or not we want that sign or not, when we really don't know the overall plan, is really tough to try to do.
One of the issues, just real quick, I apologize for interrupting, but one of the things that we have is an immediate need. And it's something that the owner has kind of created on his own. I mean, he's negotiated a lease with, he's got a 4,000, I think it's 4,000.
5,000 square foot for like Michigan Credit.
Yeah, like Michigan Credit Union moving in. And part of that is they want the sign at they want signage at the road. That's really important to them. As we talk about businesses, you know, I think, you know, saying that they need signage, they want that sign as part of their thing that they want moving in there. So we have this immediate need that we're trying to address, and that's part of the urgency of this, and I know that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot here, but that is something that, you know, future businesses will want to identify. And
Well, what it kind of means to me is, your immediate need is for a sign, the next person that comes in is gonna need a sign too. And it could really be a big mess. As much as I want you guys to have a nice sign, it could destroy that part of town. It could look terrible.
Well, like you said, it sets a precedent too, we allow, you
Yeah,
know,
so
sign
the next
and-
person's gonna need it too, and it might take 20 years for that place to
We
be
already have had
developed.
people come to us asking for the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be.
Right, we got Sports Authority,
yeah.
we got Sports Authority, Kohl's,
Yeah.
PetSmart, all those people really have signs.
But the thing about that area, that I think is different, is once you drive in there, you drive around and see what's there really fast. And probably everybody
Have a
in
road
Grand
completed,
Lake.
you can't drive around.
Well, right, and again, that place
Yes,
was built
yes,
as a
yes.
whole
Yeah.
PUD and developed as one whole property, whereas this one, I understand, was a different
Yes.
approach, but.
Yes.
And I do agree with you that those back buildings are fed by the larger stores.
Oh, yeah,
So-
and that's the whole intent of that PUD. The big stores are called anchors, and that's.
And what's there now?
Right, but
And I think that this would be the same case with the movie theater.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Dave's. And like you said, Froyo is doing very well, but that's because of everything else that's around it. It's not because they have a sign or anything on the street.
I mean, you
And
look
so the
at,
theater is serving that same function.
Yeah.
Adding your
Exactly.
anchor. And I think you're kind of wrapping it all up makes a lot of sense. To have the planning commission take a look at it from the big picture, have
Mhm.
more information from the property owner in terms of his vision, and what he sees. And he, I think, needs to really consider what his short-term needs and his long-term needs are for that property, so that it doesn't turn out to be like a hodgepodge. I think what's there is turning out quite nice. I think that the Bagger Days and the Buffalo Wild Wings are doing well. They look nice. I think that, you know, even in the new building, the new Bagger Days building is very nice.
the parking lots are full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are good signs, so I think that, and I think too, even to kind of be thinking about materials, and even though they are different materials, I think we're seeing that it's
Mhm.
stone, it's brick, masonry. I don't think necessarily a rustic wood thing is there, but that doesn't mean that it can't be. But I think showing that overall palette within that was what was in the original development agreement as well, is talking about the materials. And so if those are all changing, then I think that helps better inform.
But Jill, didn't you start out by saying that you asked him to give you something and he
We
hasn't?
have asked the property owner to give us a fuller concept. And the plans of signs by Crane, that's all they were doing is the signs. And it's what
Yeah.
they've been trying to work with us and come up with something that could be.
Well, maybe he will
but-
see if we, since we're not gonna approve this, I don't think, maybe he will see that he should get on it and come out with his big plan.
And my comment on the sign is no means any
Yeah.
disparagement to Cranny. I've seen fabulous signs and have friends that use your company.
Appreciate
I've seen
that.
Yeah.
great signs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your business has a very good reputation, but this is not. what we're
They're
looking-
working for their client.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
That's it.
Right, I understand.
So
Madam Chair,
thank you.
You have this item on your Thursday night
Yes.
agenda for the request as presented.
Mhm.
We have gotten a report and an explanation from Clear Zoning, and I don't, unless the board needs a representative from Clear Zoning here Thursday, I don't necessarily think we need to make them come up unless you see otherwise. The applicant, we'd like you to be here. I think you're gonna wanna see what happens.
Mhm.
But do you need Clear Zoning here on Thursday, or are they excused for that?
I think they presented very well what their aspect is, so.
I don't think I need that here, but what I would like to have, maybe I could dig back through my thing and see if there's, pull up the minutes from the meeting where we approved the separation of the credit union from the PUD, and see what we were told the reasoning or concept of that was.
Well, part of it was the block trees
I
and
know.
elk water, and there was, well, you can just go right
Yeah.
over it.
I don't know that it would, it's not that I want to use that to change it, I just want to, if we're going to allow this, am I going to allow 2 signs, 3 signs, or 4? And I don't think 4 is the answer at all, but you dig through my notes and find that, I guess.
Doesn't it seem like we're leaning towards send it back to the planning commission?
Well, once they have an,
Well, the only thing we have right now is a sign, so, but yeah.
I know, what, like they said, what the property owner has right now is a signed lease that in order to be in compliance with, he needs to get a sign for this customer, so that's gonna fall apart and be null and void if we say no, so, or if we send it to the planning commission, excuse me.
But
You know,
why, but he was, he.
And the planning commission is gonna make a recommendation accordingly.
Just to follow up with your question, we can send you the minutes for that.
Okay.
From that meeting, because it was interesting that the request was to add more signage, but what ended up happening is the lease got pulled out of the PUD. And so you all never took any action on the sign question.
Yeah.
Right, we just separated that
Just
whole lot from
separated
the
it out,
PUD.
right, and
And
because,
now
and
part
that
of,
was, because it was a recognition that clearly that was separate. It was oriented in a different fashion, it was not built the way that the original concept was, and so that it seemed reasonable that that would be treated as a separate entity.
And I agree.
And that kind of made it easy because then we didn't have to talk about the rest of it. But now, I think, we should, and looking at it too in the big picture, making sure that everybody understands where we're going.
I just had one other question, while you're here. On the Merrill Lynch building, if they get a new tenant, then they're allowed to have a certain size on the building, right? And of course, there's a Merrill Lynch sign, so there would be another spot that would be on the front of that building that would say the credit union, right?
On the front of the building, it could be.
Well, that's where
It
that
would be allowed by the PUD essentially.
Yeah, because it's already there. The zoning ordinance is already there that they can put a sign in there for that tenant, right?
Correct.
On the front of the building.
To be read through the trees and from 300 feet.
Same as a Merrill
As the trees
Lynch.
continue to grow.
Same as Merrill Lynch.
There's not that many trees in front of Merrill Lynch. There is in front of the credit union, but there isn't anything in front of.
Actually, we were looking at that closely recently, and there are spruce trees planted all down through there. And there's a few that look like oak trees that are planted there as well. And I know the spruce trees in my yard grow a little better than a foot a year, so I gotta think that,
And that's on your client's property, right?
yes. I would imagine it was probably, I'm guessing, it was part of the agreement when that building
It was.
was put together, that, hey, you gotta have certain vegetation out there.
Right.
And here's how far apart they're gonna be. I wanted to say something just real quickly to what Chris said. Our industry has changed quite a bit, quite honestly, in about the last 5 to 6 years. And the reason our industry has changed is on-premise sign has become more important than ever. And the reason being is the other forms of advertising that we all grew up with have changed. I'll bet you half of you here have got something being recorded on your TV right now. And then when you get home, you're gonna take and watch that, or maybe tomorrow or the next day, and you're gonna zoom right through the commercials, because you're not gonna sit there and you're not gonna watch them. When I get in my car and I'm head on to home, I'm gonna listen to XM radio, and I'm not listening to commercials, and so a lot of that is gone. Newspapers, a lot of people don't even subscribe to the newspaper anymore. If you want something on the news, you go ahead and get on MSN and you look it up and you see what it is that you want to see. So those forms of media have changed considerably. And so on-premise advertising, to get the attention of the passerby, to do business with them, you gotta do it right there in front of you. Other than that, they're gonna head on home. So the whole program has changed out there for on-premise signage, and it's good for our industry. It's kind of going back to the 30s and 40s where we were doing exotic signs and things like that. And everybody here, I grew up in Grand Blanc myself. I graduated from high school, I don't want to tell you how many years ago, too many years ago, a lot of years ago. And I feel the same way. I live out in the Davison area, but I feel like home when I drive through Grand Blanc. That's my wife who does. But that's just the way it is. I like to stop at the hot dog stand and get a hot dog over there and take my grandkids there in the summertime and stuff like that. So I share your values of how you want this town to look and how to feel. And I remember the 2020 that was going on in the city of Grand Blanc when they were working on the vision for that. I'm not a big fan of the design that we got going on here. Mark tells me, hey, this is a design with a future. Well, I'm not feeling it, and I don't think the board is either. So I'd like to hope that, knowing that on-premise signage is so important, especially today with the way advertising is, that we can come back and present a design that's really gonna fit the bill for the township and the tenants that are out there. So I'd like to think maybe Scott and some of the others, and I share your feelings, Scott, could be open to that early. Well, I'm sure, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you. I think, having like a transitional design, something that fits everything, different looks. Kind of like a piece of furniture that kind of meets with the, the ultra modern and fits in with the more rustic kind of, would be a design that, if it's done right, would add value to that corridor too. Because like I said, I think Grand Ridge is beautiful signs. We do something that's equivalent to that kind of thing on the other side of the road. They're complementary, they're not opposing. And the ordinance itself, the township ordinance does allow for tenant panels to be on signs in business centers, in plazas, in PUDs, why not?
Okay, thank you. Moving on,
Can I just, not on this, but
Mhm.
the ordinance that we discussed with General Motors, is that not going to be read tonight? That will be Thursday?
No,
Or was that, did we pass that? Did we pass that?
we passed that, we adopted the second reading of that last month.
It's in your minutes from the.
Can I just back up and add one comment to
Yes.
that? I would really like if we could somehow tie what we believe they owe us into this whole deal. I'm just really uncomfortable about passing anything and then giving General Motors the latitude to institute what they want when they probably owe us a significant amount of money.
We're still looking into that to see what we can do.
We're gonna pursue that.
Mhm.
They're not necessarily developed, they're not formally tied together, but.
But if we pass it,
We did.
We did pass it.
not the third, we didn't,
No, we have two readings, we had the second reading, and it was adopted at the last meeting.
okay, I thought, I keep on thinking it's three.
It's two, and then for zoning ordinance amendments, it's only one, but, yeah, we had our second reading last
Okay.
week.
But that doesn't mean that we're not still working on it. It's just not tied. Okay, so we're considering the first reading of an ordinance to adopt the latest amendments to the National Building Code. Is there any discussion on that?
That's just an update, right, Mr.
Yeah.
Wyatt?
Yep.
Update to keep us in compliance with the national codes. All good.
Okay. So next is my request to allocate funds to the supervisor's budget for the hiring of a temporary part-time employee. We allocated such to the superintendent, but not my budget, so I need somebody.
Do you have anybody in mind? What
Yes.
kind of person are you looking for?
Right now, I'm just looking for a part-time person till we get the new director, so he has a chance to.
Is the one we already had?
Hmm?
The one that you had before? Or
No, she's back in school.
not? Oh, okay. So what's the wage structure going to be?
It's going to be the same as, like a clerical one, $15 an hour. And she, it's part-time, no fringe benefits at this time.
Making sure how long do we'll have her employed or, yeah.
I would say, until we get him settled, it would probably be 90 days.
Oh, until we hire
Mhm.
permanent.
Yeah.
Until we hire a permanent supervisor and get him settled.
Yeah.
So maybe overlapping a little bit.
Yeah. Mhm.
I want to make a projection to the language here that the superintendent is going to be a him.
Okay,
And
yeah, all
That
right.
stuff really bothers me, and it's not fair.
You're right.
I just
You're right.
read today,
You're
I just
right.
read today, there are more states that have ratified the equal marriage than the Equal Rights Amendment.
36.
That is terrible.
Well, this doesn't say who it is. It just says hiring.
Yeah.
And that's your point, and I apologize, 'cause I think I just, in my
Yeah.
mind, just implied, because our former,
Right.
both of our former superintendents were male,
Yeah.
that was,
I know,
I don't-
know.
Yeah.
It's just a
I'm
hot
gonna
button issue with me
open
right
the
now.
interview, any and every applicant that
Yeah.
applies regardless. So, I just wanted to clarify the
yeah.
timeframe for this part-time
Yeah,
person.
I'm
That's-
looking at probably 90 days.
Would this person have a specific purpose maybe, or?
Yes, I mean, right now, I need somebody, because have to go out so much, I need somebody to handle what's coming in here, and they would be available for other people if I didn't need them, okay? But what I need somebody to handle my phone calls, to keep up with the necessary filing and that kind of thing that's going on right now.
Okay.
This is a different wage scale than we had before, though, correct? I don't think previously you had someone at 15.
I had somebody that was interning, yeah, so she was at minimum wage.
No, she was at 10.
No, she was 8.
Oh, I thought I saw 10, that could be mistaken.
No. I went back and checked. Yes.
Go ahead, Meg. Yeah. Just,
Hmm?
just from my perspective, I think it sounds reasonable. And my understanding is I'm assuming that if any of the executive team needs to use her, that
Right.
she'd be available.
That's right.
So I think, and it's only temporary until we
Yeah.
find a person. I think that's more than reasonable. And I'm gonna add, I agree with you yet again, this is getting scary. That I also think, as far as the wage goes, you gotta be careful. You don't wanna try to get the cheapest person who will work for $8.50 an hour. We gotta make sure we're gonna get somebody that's gonna do the job properly, and
Well, I know-
that's more than a $8 an hour job.
And need the confidentiality and
Correct.
integrity to work
Correct.
on that
So-
position.
Here's another hot button issue with me is minimum wage. I don't think anybody should be making that except high school kids. I just think that's terrible to do that to an adult human being. And I'm sorry that Michigan is being so slow about changing it.
Well, I think it should be definitely tied to the skill required to do the jobs. My question to Mr. Laddie, if we can, is the way this is written, the way this request is written, is it proper? Should we allocate it to the supervisor's budget, or should we, how do we want to?
I'm glad you asked that. The reason that it's on the agenda, actually, is because, well, ordinarily, if you have a department head that has funds available for the hiring of a part-time person, that department has the authority to hire somebody without board action.
Correct.
It turns out, though, that Mickey's budget does not have, it cannot accommodate having somebody hired on a temporary, or a part-time or a temporary basis, and so that's why it's come to you as it will be officially a budget amendment when it comes to move money probably out of the superintendent's funds, specifically an amount to accommodate that temporary wage will be moved into Mickey's budget.
Okay.
It does look odd, but it's odd because there just isn't enough, there's no line item for her as far as a temporary.
Because unlike the department head, she doesn't have the budget to allow her.
She does, it's just not, doesn't have money in it.
There's nothing there.
Okay.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry. Well, and the idea, and I just talked to Sandy a little bit about this, is that you right now have an amount of money reserved in the superintendent's category. You're going to use a certain part of that for the hiring process, for the expenses related to that. Obviously, we're going to have to visit that budget to make sure we've got enough money to accommodate anybody who we hire. But in the meantime, there's, at least Sandy indicates that there is some money that we could allocate to Mickey's budget on a temporary basis to accommodate this if you choose to go ahead with it.
And we're talking 3 or 4 months, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And again, it's going to be someone that won't exceed 29 hours a week and somebody that's going to be very close to the beginning clerical W wage scale.
Well, shouldn't we put that in there so we're clarified, so that she's protected? So we should put in $15 an hour at maximum 29 hours, right?
No.
Well,
I think we
I'm
should
just
move the money,
asking
but I
Mr.
think
Laddie.
we should
I'm
allow,
asking
okay,
Mr. Laddie.
I'll let him answer that, I'll give my.
Well, I mean, you could do that, but again, you don't do that for any other department head.
Yeah, we do.
No, we
We
don't.
get to hire when we get the listed amount.
There isn't board, and for a temporary, or for a part-time employee, there isn't any board action.
It was listed in the minutes and in the application, so.
Well,
That was for full-time, wasn't it?
I don't want to have part-time, we listed it too.
certainly, we can create whatever documentation you want to have, and the board can say, look, we'll do this budget amendment, but it's going to be with the understanding this is for a period of time until we hire a full-time superintendent. Number one, and number two, it's going to be someone that doesn't exceed 28 hours a week, and that's going to be, the maximum wage will be the minimum, or the floor, if you will, of a Chapter W employee. But I don't know if we need to have, just, if you want to put it in the minutes.
What I would rather do, it, if I may, and I, correct me wrong, Mickey's gonna interview this person, Mickey's gonna determine the qualifications of this person. I would just assume, as I would expect any department who's gonna hire somebody, to determine what a fair compensation is for that person. And I don't want to tie her hands and say, okay, we have to pay this person this amount of money. I want her to be able to base that on the interview, the experience, what that person can bring to the township. I would like to put in the minutes or into the budget line, you know, for a dollar amount not to exceed
Yeah.
$15 an hour, for a term not to exceed 29 hours per week at a maximum of 6 months' time. Not that it will be 6 months, but a maximum of 6 months' time.
Okay.
That
That's
way, if we hire a new superintendent in 3 months, great, we're done. And if it takes us 5.5 months, we're still covered. Okay?
I like that approach.
I like that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted the dollar amount in there in the hourly rate.
But as a cap, not as a set in stone.
Right.
Well, that's fine,
I
as long as it's in the minutes,
Okay.
that's all I was trying to do.
Is everybody?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll write it up. We can write it up that way for Thursday night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on, we're going to discuss the elimination of the fourth Tuesday of the month board meeting. We had two sides today, so when we discussed them among ourselves, so let me hear
We
from
have
you.
two what?
We heard two sides of it,
Both sides
of what
of
we
the
were
issue.
discussing it in
Oh,
the
okay.
meeting this morning, so
Okay.
I'd like to hear from the rest of you on what you think about it.
I would be all for it. I think we use that fourth meeting mainly for, it seems that we were going over a bunch of contracts, and I think we're kind of wrapping that up. I think we just have fire, I think, outstanding.
Just, yeah.
And we could always, if we needed a meeting, we could always ask for it, right? I mean, it doesn't say that we can't have an additional meeting.
No. Okay. Well, let's get the outside ones first.
Okay.
Call me strange, but I like the idea of the meeting. Here's why. Our agenda, even though it may not have a lot of items on it tonight, we're usually here fairly late anyways. And I'm trying to imagine if we only had 2 meetings a month, how much later we'd be here. I mean, we've got meetings that we're getting out of close to 11 o'clock. If we only have 2 meetings a month, I'm concerned that, I don't know, 3 meetings a month and having them spread out the way we do, it keeps things fresh in our mind and we can follow up on things. I think some of the board of directors I've served on in the past, monthly meetings or every other month, the problem is you forget where you left off possibly at the last meeting. And you have to have minutes just so you can recall the details. I have 3 meetings a month, those details are still fresh in my mind anyways from meeting to meeting. So I would be in favor of keeping it and basically canceling them if we didn't need it.
Okay. That was what Bill brought up today, okay?
Okay, Nick, you know, you've been on this board for a long time. My second term, I can recall more times per month, I think, where we've needed that meeting than we haven't. And granted, things were slower in the last couple of years than they had been previous to that. And I think we're starting to see that turn around. There's always going to be some issue in my mind, and I know we're going to wrap up the fire thing hopefully real soon here, and that'll be done and out of the way. But there's going to be another contract coming next year that we've got to talk about. We've also used those meetings a lot of times for not just executive sessions, but if we bring in a
For
consulting
training,
firm, training. Also, that's a great opportunity for us to sit around the conference table and dive into a PUD, for example, and discuss an amendment to a PUD, things of that sort. So I'm going to kind of say I like the idea of having that meeting on the table and canceling them as needed. I think we're probably going to cancel fewer than we're going to have.
Yeah.
I would also think that I would kind of like to keep them on there and wait and see how our future superintendent is going to manage things and how he or she may set this up to operate.
Okay. Chris?
I don't think that we would ever cancel a meeting personally. I can't see us saying, well, let's cancel next month's meeting. I did go through, I didn't bring it with me, I started to write it down today. I went through the third meeting, the fourth Tuesday meeting of the minutes for the last year, just about. And almost every one of them, there was one that was a real long, legitimate business got done at that meeting, but almost every single one of them had to do with contract negotiations or labor issues. And, what was I gonna say besides that? There was another thing, but that went, and the, policy governance thing. That was those were some really long meetings. And that was 3 of them. But there was very little business really discussed or done at the meetings other than contract negotiations, which I think are pretty much done except for the finishing up the fire, for at least a year, and probably, is it 2?
3 years.
3 years, so that's something to keep in mind, because almost every single one of those meetings, it was like 20 minutes out here, or 10 minutes out here, and 3 hours in there, and 10 minutes back out here. So you guys might want to go through the minutes of before Thursday and see, because, I mean, there's always stuff we can discuss, but.
Yes.
I just had a follow-up thing,
Okay,
but I'll
well,
wait.
let Earl
One of the things that I would like to see us do as a board or as a township, like, we do a great job of managing, what we have before us. But, I'll go back to our policy governance meetings. What I'd like to look at is looking at what we would like to achieve as a township and start
Setting up
laying out
goals, yes.
some plans. And, we've got a new DPW director, we have a new finance director. Let's put our heads together with our new fire chief, and put our heads together and say, what do we want to do in these different departments and to achieve what we want our township to be? And when we talked about the Trillium Center and what we're asking this developer to tell us what his plan is. What's our plan for the township? I hear people on Facebook in the township and neighbors saying, hey, we need these restaurants, we need this and that. What are we doing, to talk about that? In the next few months, I want to talk about, what kind of person we want for permanent supervisor. What kind of skills we want them to have.
Superintendent.
I'm sorry. Superintendent.
Are you replacing me?
Quick to correct that.
I'm
Scott's motive comes out.
Freudian slip there.
What skills and qualities do we want them to have, so.
Okay.
So I'd like us to use those meetings, if nothing else, to look forward and figure out what we want to do.
Okay. Earl?
I think it's very important, because when we first came here 6 years ago, we only had 2, and there was a problem that people said the board wouldn't respond properly or quick enough. And that's why we went to 3 meetings, and we have in the provisions that at any of the 3 meetings, we can pass anything that we have to pass as long as we have a quorum, which to me is very important for this township. So if something pops up, we don't have to worry about 18 hours before the meeting to make sure we can get something scheduled. I would have it in the fact that we could cancel it any time. That way we can pass anything we have to pass in a timely manner without having to wait. And sometimes it's more than 2 weeks, because if you hit the one, it's gonna go into the other week, and there could be a holiday or whatever. So to me, it's just too far off. And the meetings will be longer, because we had longer meetings when we only had 2 meetings, and then when it went to 3, at least it leveled it out. And it kept you more informed in the township, and to me, it's just a safer and a more efficient way to have it done.
Okay.
I just have a question. Is there any reason that the committee of the whole meeting is so close to the board meeting? I mean, do they have to be that close together?
I
Can I
think,
speak to that?
Yeah.
sure.
As a resident, before I ran for my first term, I came to meetings for almost 3 years as a resident, just sat out there and watched the sport. And I kind of wish we would do it more. The board I would watch would go through all the business on Tuesday night.
Mhm.
They would sit here and hash it out, and this
Mhm.
meeting would go till 10 o'clock at night.
Mhm.
Thursday, it was motion,
Right.
vote, done, next, motion, vote, done.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
Thursday night meetings really moved, granted, they had a few that went long.
Mhm.
And I think that's the intent of this meeting, is for us to, let's talk to
Mhm.
the people that are here, you know, for the amendments to PUDs or for any proposed change we have to make. Let's hash out the details that we want to hash out as board members. So Thursday night, I go home tonight, I got to answer a couple of questions I have, I'm ready to vote on Thursday.
Mhm.
See, I totally get that, but I personally, when I hear some of the things I hear on a Tuesday night, I wish I had a little bit more time to investigate more thoroughly and to, you know, I mean, there's things that, you know, I just wish I had a few more days instead
Well,
of
we
having
can
to.
table it, and we can say, we want to go to the third meeting in the month.
Mhm.
That way, if you didn't have.
No, I don't want to do that. I'm just asking and just stating that,
Yeah, we've done
that
it.
it'd be nice to have a couple days in there. Or, I mean, why not have a Tuesday meeting one week and then the Thursday the next?
Pardon?
But I'm good with whatever you old professionals think would be
I
best.
think the reason for that we do it that way, or one of the reasons is that everybody's got different jobs outside, meetings that they have to go to, and Larry's taken on the responsibility of 2 meetings, so.
And there's meetings going on in here,
Yeah.
outside of
Yeah.
our board meetings.
Right.
Okay.
How about you, Mickey, do you have a preference?
I know, I'm either way, I think it's a good idea, that we have the chance to meet, but we also have the chance to cancel. So anyway, that's the discussion, and is there any consensus on this? It seemed,
We'll just vote on it Thursday.
You want to leave it on for Thursday?
Yeah.
Clark will be here, and he
Yeah.
can throw his 2 cents.
okay, and now, we have, our DPW director. Please come up and tell us about the SCADA.
Wonderful roller skater. Good evening, everybody. As you know, for the past year or so, Assistant Director Hobson and Dan Potter have been reviewing and researching the replacement of our SCADA system. If you don't know, the SCADA system is basically the brains of our water and sewer infrastructure. It controls pumps, it monitors the water tower, the tanks, the lift stations, the pump stations, everything else. It basically lets us control everything in an automated fashion so that we don't have people out pushing buttons and fill tanks and stuff like that. So our SCADA system is getting outdated. The hardware, the radio hardware is not supported by Motorola anymore. And we have had some glitches in the past couple months with the system. I think I included in my last board report how we had an issue with the Baldwin Road water tower where it completely drained and SCADA did not catch the issue. We're not exactly sure what happened with it. Since then, we've been very closely monitoring the system, but we feel that it may be due to the age of the system, the operating software, and the computer. So the urgency to make this change is upon us. We have come up with a solution for the SCADA system, which basically is replacing it, mirroring the system we have now. Sticking with a radio system rather than cellular, which there's 2 proposals in here. The other one is for Kennedy. Kennedy was proposing a cellular system, which we were not comfortable with, and we decided would not work well with their system. So UIS is the leading provider for the radio system in our area, and we have been working with them for a very long time. They built the SCADA system we have now. With this system, we would be switching from server-based information storage to web-hosted. So myself, Dave, or any of my technicians could be out in the field and pull up the SCADA system on their smartphones. As it stands right now, when we had that issue at the Baldwin Road water tower, Myself and one of the technicians were at the water tower, and we kept having to call back to Township Hall to get the status on the SCADA system, because we cannot view that remotely. Only Dave Hobson has the ability to, because we can only do that with one person at this time. Web posted, anybody is able to do it, who has a login, who has permission. You just go to the website, log in, and up pops everything. You can view historical trending, alarms, and current statuses. We'll also have the ability to put our system on the internet to give our residents a clear view of how much water we use every day, how the components of our system are all hooked together, when the pumps turn on, when the pumps turn off, when our peak usage is. They'll be able to look at all of the statuses just like we can. Obviously, they can't make any changes. And, they can't be intrusive in that at all. But I think that it would be something some residents would see value in. This is our best solution right now for the SCADA system that we've come up with. We have talked with 3 different companies, UIS, Kennedy Industries, who provided us a quote, but not exactly what we wanted. And then we also talked with Aetna Supply, who works with Census Meters, who does our water metering system. There was the potential that we could tie the SCADA system into our FlexNet water metering system, but it's unproven technology. It's mostly used in the electrical field, not in the water sewer industry, so we're not comfortable going that route. This system, and I did provide you with SCADA system price calculations, because Earl and myself looked at it a little bit earlier, and we found it to be a little bit confusing, the quote they gave us. So I thought I'd break it down and provide that with you. This system overall will cost $197,000, and we plan to do it over 2 years. We'll start with the first 3 items on the quote, which is updating the HMI, which is basically the brains of the system, and then we'll program, obviously, the RTUs in that, which communicate with the FIUs, I'm sorry, there's so many acronyms to remember. The FIUs basically pulls all the information in from all the different sites that we have. And the FIU transmits to a station we have in Dave's office, and that's what tells everything what to do.
Okay, I have a question with Motorola. I thought that was what we were having the problems with already, is this.
Well, the reason we're having problems with the Motorola equipment is because it's outdated.
Okay.
It's older and it's not supported by Motorola anymore.
But then.
Well, we're going to
that-
Motorola again now.
Correct. We're going with Motorola's latest and greatest technology. We feel that the longevity of their equipment is worth it.
Okay, so this is good now. Motorola is going to keep on.
We believe so.
Okay.
Can I have a question?
Mm-hmm.
You had 3 bids, is that what you said?
We had 3 bids, yeah.
And I see the Kennedy and I see this UIS, I guess I don't.
We did not get a written bid from Aetna Supply because it was so out of the league that we didn't bother asking them to waste their time. Basically, the approach that Dave and Dan took was they investigated the different systems, figured out what would be best for the township, and then got prices on that from the suppliers.
Is there a third person that you could get a bid from? And then the question I would have is, with Kennedy, you said that they didn't provide, did you give them the same specs that the UIS?
Correct.
And
Kennedy had the same opportunities UIS did. Basically, Kennedy Industries, their SCADA system is based on a cellular platform. They use cell phone technology rather than radio technology. Everybody knows cell phone service is in and out. It's not reliable. We haven't heard great things about cell phone service. The radio technology is really the leading in the industry. Kennedy gave us a quote to convert our radio technology to their platform, which is basically taking all the hardware that we have and transmitting it to their brain system. We would still have to go through UIS to purchase the radio system. But in addition, we'd be using Kennedy. Kennedy's platform is more than twice the price. Like, it's not, yeah, it is more than twice the price that UIS is. And their web hosting is $11,000, where Kennedy's is $3,900 a year.
Okay, thank you.
Scott?
Yeah, couple of things. I looked up the cruise SCADA system. Couldn't find anything on the internet about it at all. One of the companies actually that I introduced Dave and Keith to, that we actually had a meeting probably a year ago, was Motor City, which they do quite a bit of Detroit work. And they were told they think they were going to be able to bid on it. And I don't see them anymore in here.
Correct, and I did not know about Motor City whenever I was introduced to this. These were the two options that I initially started investigating, and then whenever we were sitting down with Aetna Supply one day, we brought up the SCADA system, and that's how we got into their portion of it also.
Because one of the things is, that I've become aware of is that there's some, well, number one is that we're using off-site computers basically with the system, so we're paying a fee for that. It's kind of like using a fancy OnStar system as opposed to owning the complete system ourselves. And I'm wondering if we don't look at owning the system rather than owning part of it. And then it's kind of like, from what I understand in talking to a few people, we kind of own some of the equipment in the field, but it all reports somewhere else. And then we get that information back, as opposed to us owning the complete system. Because if that company that it all reports to goes out of business or has issues or decides they're going to change their monthly fee, or they need to upgrade and force us to upgrade, then it costs us more money as opposed to owning our own system, which may cost more money in the initial, but we're more in control too. That's one of the things anyways to look at.
And currently, we do own our own system, and we do bring all of our own information in and utilize everything ourselves.
Right.
The reason we wanted to convert to web hosting is for basically the flexibility of it. The fact that we can be mobile, that instead of being restricted to only having that information in the office.
The current radios with Motorola became obsolete about, I don't know, how long have we had those?
I believe the system we have now is 15 to 20 years old.
I thought the radios were about 10 years old though.
They could be. They may have been replaced.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm just looking at some of the terms and conditions, and I know this is probably really, really petty, but I was reading this, and just as an example, if you look at number 5, it says responsibility of seller shall cease upon delivery to and receipt of the product by a common carrier, at which point purchaser will bear all risk for the product. Now, that just bothers me. I would think that these folks would assume the risk of everything until it's delivered to us. And if you read through these, several of these, I mean, it's all written in their behalf. And I have a problem with this. If we're spending $200,000 and they don't want to assume the risk of, they should insure their product till it gets to us.
And it's operational.
And it's operational, and we shouldn't have to assume any risk. And if you read through these at various parts, this is, I find it problematic. And and I can appreciate, and by no means am I an expert on anything you're talking about.
Absolutely.
But I would agree with Scott on that, is that I would prefer to own it. I don't prefer to be indebted to these folks, as one thing. And the second thing is, I know it's probably a little more cumbersome to have somebody at the office, but, you know, we have the capability of, you know, almost instantaneously, if you have somebody here, that they can relate the problem.
We do,
And,
during normal operating hours.
right, I understand that, but I just, you know, anyway.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I did have a brief discussion with Jeff prior to the meeting.
Mhm.
I mentioned that I've got a number of concerns and actually would like to meet with Jeff prior to, I don't have time tomorrow
Yeah.
for a
Mhm.
Thursday meeting unfortunately, but I would like to ask the board to hold off on making a decision with this because I would like to sit down with Jeff and speak with another individual that is with a competing company and just get some of the pros and cons that maybe, and document them for the board to be able
Right.
to see what those are too. I mean, we're spending a lot of money here, and I'd rather look at the long game than just, you know, hey, let's get this thing done. I mean,
Is
we
there-
better-
Yeah, can we get a bid with that too, so we at least compare apples to apples?
And I absolutely agree that we should look at every possible opportunity.
Right.
And if Motor City Electric was a possibility before, I obviously will research and figure out why they're not anything it now. Something happened along the line, but.
And I'd like to look too at the pluses and minuses of whether it's cellular versus radio and, you know,
So,
rather than just looking at which one's cheaper and which one's, you know, more expensive. What are the pros and cons of those? I mean,
can we table this, Jeff?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean,
So we can do a little more investigation?
absolutely, do whatever board pleasures.
Yes.
Yeah,
If you do that, Madam Chair, I mean, it's on the agenda as proposed for Thursday, you could remove it from Thursday's agenda.
Yeah.
They could vote to table it.
Yeah, okay. I think-
my comments too, and I'm in agreement with tabling so we can research it, because it is a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm gonna go back to supporting the purpose of a township superintendent or township manager, if you will, is this, and again, this goes back before your time here, we updated the water meter system. We partnered with Money Township. We purchased the equipment, Money Township's using part of our equipment, and that benefited us for the cost and so forth. And I don't expect you to have time to do that, but I mean, that's almost something we might want to discuss with the city of Grand Blanc, with Money Township or Goodrich, you know, hey, can you guys use this smart this if we were to buy one? And share that over 2 or 3 communities.
I think there's a lot of variables that we can
There
look
sure is.
into.
There sure is.
Yeah.
I agree it needs to be done, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, just want to try to do it the right way.
Right, absolutely. Yeah,
I would like to I would like to know which one is safer for like hacking and stuff like that, if it goes to web-based.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's kind of dangerous.
the thing is our servers with this now, they're already connected to the internet. The internet is communicating. I wish I could explain this better, I'm kind of at a loss right now. The server right now is connected to the internet, and I feel that if anything is connected to the internet, it can be hacked. The servers that are located in Dave's office right now, I believe are just as vulnerable as the servers that are located in Lansing, which would be hosting the SCADA system.
Right, but now you guys are all gonna be carrying around these phones that can access it, right?
Absolutely.
And so you would be able to make a change if you wanted to?
The only people that would be able to make a change are those who's authorized to make a change.
So
Dave
somebody could
Hobson
get-
is the only person that's
Right, so
authorized.
somebody could get your code or steal your phone or,
Well, you can do that now, because Dave has mobile access now, but he's the only person that has mobile access now.
I think what Chris is saying is, that's one of the things we probably need to look at too, is security issues. If one is better security-wise than the other, let's make that part of the decision-making process. That maybe it costs us a little
Right.
bit more to go, let's say cellular,
Oh, yeah,
but it's more
absolutely.
secure, you know, and just make that part of the equation that we want to look at is security, because we've seen what hackers can do.
right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And we can definitely look at all that stuff.
Okay.
So should we
Thank you
take a
very much.
motion to table it?
No,
You
no,
can't.
it's not, it's just proposed for Thursday. If there's consensus to remove it from the Thursday agenda, you can just.
Then we
add it
just move to table it on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
We got 4 people.
Yeah.
So we'll take it off Thursday and you guys will keep working on it?
Absolutely, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Now to get down to the last thing on the agenda is we're considering a proposal by Clear Zoning Incorporated to provide consultation services to the Planning and Zoning Department. Dave, do you want to take?
I'd like to just introduce it, then we're going to hear from Rod,
Yeah.
who's going to speak on behalf of Clear Zoning. And what has happened is, and this is something that Nikki and I discussed, and she and I both had discussions with Maria, the Planning and Zoning Department, and also with Rod and Jill to a certain extent. And what we have is a bit of a void left by Keith when he resigned, and the duties that Keith undertook for our Planning and Zoning Department was to kind of coordinate, I think, some of the more difficult or more complicated issues that came up on a daily basis, but also were project driven as well. We've had a lot of support and a lot of help and expertise from Clear Zoning. And what we have found is that with Keith being gone, we probably have a void that we need to fill as far as expertise goes. There are things that Maria McLean deals with questions in his barrage of questions on a nearly daily basis. She's quite good at her job. She's quite good at providing direction and answers to certain questions, but there are things that are beyond her level of expertise.
Yes.
And so what we did, Mickey and I and Keith, I think had some conversations with Rod. We asked if there was some supplemental support that Clear Zoning can give us to answer some of the more difficult questions or work on some of the bigger projects on an in-house basis for some period of time during the course of the week. And also to be aware of the fact that there may be generated more inquiries from Maria down to their office in Oakland County, and that there may be a way for them to be compensated for that. And so Rod and Clear Zoning put together a proposal that offers, I think, 6.5 hours per week for somebody here in our building, and also offers a block of time, maybe it's 8 hours a week, 8.5 hours a week down in their office to offer support. And what Mickey and I and Keith and Maria have done is we're trying to figure out what an appropriate and economically efficient amount of support would be. And Clear Zoning's been great in saying, look, this is a proposal we threw out there based on what your initial questions were and your requests were. We recognize that it may be more than you need, and we recognize that it may need to be adjusted going forward, depending on the surge and ebb of business, number one, and also depending on how well we can schedule or administer questions that come in that can't be handled by Maria. And so I'd like to give Rod a chance to explain what he thinks, what they can provide for us based on our need. I did, and again, I'm the least familiar with this situation compared to Mickey and compared to Keith, but I was thinking that with some concerted effort on behalf of Maria and some help from my office, we might be able to entertain maybe every other week presence from Clear Zoning in our building, and maybe we don't need as much of, we don't need to reserve a block of time at Clear Zoning down in their office. So, but I'd be interested to hear, first of all, Rod's thoughts, and then secondly, your thoughts, and see if we can't work something out.
Yeah, because one of the things that was brought up was that we would like a whole day, a strict 8-hour day, for you to be here, probably on the same day you have site plan, deal or something like that.
Sure. Well, good evening, and Happy New Year as well. Yes, as Mr. Laddie indicated, we prepared this based upon input in terms of what we thought the township might need in terms of our services. We're here to assist you. And as he indicated as well, it can be as flexible as it needs to be. I think it's one of the advantages of working with us. You don't need us as much, you don't use us. If you need us more, we're there. And it's good for you. It's good. It makes it a flexible situation. So that's what we're here to do, is to provide that. Just a little bit of an explanation. Yeah, the thought here is there would be one day a week. That could be every other week, whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine. And then the additional 8.5 hours was envisioned as being somewhat flexible. That would cover a lot of the phone calls that come in. It would cover some other discussions we might have with prospective developers that are looking at sites. It could also cover some time to actually maybe even come up for another half day when it's needed during the week and provide some additional time, or to meet with, let's say someone's proposing a new PUD and you need somebody to come up and meet, there's some things like that that could happen where there maybe isn't a formal application yet. Because there was a lot that was going on, there's a lot of meetings that happened with either a planning director or a superintendent, supervisor type, where you're getting that ongoing contact. And since you may not have the same level of staffing now, then we can certainly help you with that to the extent you need it. And then when if you find, once again, you need more or less, we can adjust as well. So we're very flexible. So I guess at that point, I'll just turn it over to questions, but that's where we are today, and just let us know how we can help you.
I appreciate their expertise again on the planning commission. I see them every month working on different projects, but I don't think we could ever hire somebody in-house to have the expertise that their firm does. Just need to figure out what the right mix of hours is to help here, I guess. And I'm not sure who's most equipped to be able to make that judgment call as far as how many hours we need.
Well, as I say, what we had looked at, rather than a partial day, is to go to the whole day, and if we can do it try out every other week for a whole, for a whole 8-hour day, yeah. And then see what we need as far as your in-house kind of deal, but definitely we do want that as a minimum that we would do.
If I might add, we can do just what Mr. Lai suggested too, for that, we can do the rest just hourly.
Yeah.
And that way,
Yeah,
if someone
that's-
can need
yeah.
more, it's there, and there's no
Right.
commitment that way, and we're happy to
Yeah.
do that.
Would we need to make a commitment on 8 hours every other week, or would that just be
That's-
month by month, that we could see if that's enough, or we could add 2
We
That's-
could try it and see
Yeah.
how it works and adjust
That's
it.
that's what we kind of would like to do, and that seemed to be what made Maria most comfortable with it.
I'm curious as to the fee for every other week.
Well, it's basically calculated on the hourly rate, so we've discounted our hourly rate down to 88 from 96. So it'd be the number of hours times that
Okay,
amount.
that's fine.
So,
Yeah, I think it indicated $1,408 a month, right,
Mhm.
on the 2 8 hours. is what-
basically be what?
Right. That's what was
Well-
said.
Yeah, I think, and I took the 80, by the way, thank you for your
Yes.
rate decrease, but we just took, I just straight 8-hour day
Yeah,
and multiplied it by 88 and came up with that, and then, is that how you guys bill?
yeah, I guess we were considering, if we were here for a whole day, it might be more like 6.5 to 7 by the time you take some time, like a half hour to meet.
Oh,
yeah.
And then, maybe, just trying to
Mhm.
trying to get the rate down as low,
Yeah.
it's a half-hour day is still a pretty good day, we're here pretty much all day.
So it'd be 6.5 hours a day for a working day is what you say you're going to bill us then?
That's what we would build it, yes, it's assuming we would basically, maybe come in at 9, leave at 4, take a half hour for lunch.
Right.
That'd be kind of like the,
I think it's an excellent investment. I think it's the best money we're gonna be spending this year, seriously.
So
That would even be less then, so.
right, and then the rest would just
Yeah.
be hourly.
yeah.
Will you just bill, attorneys generally bill like on the 10th of an hour, is that something?
We go on a quarter hour.
Yeah, okay.
I'm concurrent with that. I would caution us, I'm not sure that doing it every other week for a month, determine how much I'm gonna need might be long. I would think maybe we'll go 2 months or possibly 3 to really get a good feel for how often we're gonna use this. First month might be a little rough.
Yeah.
And also, the first month may have a lot more business that's been piling up, that's gotta get pushed through, and then
Right.
we'll think, wow, we need them, let's commit to this, and then find out we don't. It could go the opposite direction too.
Right.
I'd say 90 days.
And one other thing, just to point out, which is kind of interesting, given the time of year, you're not as busy right now as you
Yeah.
will be in a couple of months.
Correct.
So it's gonna, things are gonna change.
Yeah, and we'll be able to modify it
Yeah,
later,
so-
so
yeah.
I think that's
It's
reasonable.
win-win.
May change from month to month.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, at least we got the flexibility. I mean, you're giving us the flexibility, $80 an hour, plus you're saying instead of 8 hours, it's gonna be 6.5, so that's only 13 hours
Mhm.
a month.
Which
So that's
we-
just a hair over $1,000, and then if we need more, we just use you for more.
Well,
That's
the
perfect.
flexibility they're giving us is worth
Yeah.
something
That's
too.
right.
I mean,
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome that you can do that.
And they know our township, they know our business, they're getting from
Right.
them also. Absolutely.
Sounds like a plan.
So do we have to modify that to say we're gonna do it for the 2 hours in there?
Well, how do you want to handle it? Do you want to modify your proposal, or do you?
We can do a quick modification to it to reflect the results of this and send it to you.
that'll be great.
We'll leave it on the agenda for Thursday.
Okay.
Could you say up to 8 hours, couldn't it, and wouldn't that cover it?
Yeah, we'll work it out so
Yeah.
something, right, some language so that it's.
We'll coordinate and get that to you.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Before we finish up, there's just, we want to discuss this or maybe just get some information put together for Thursday night. I know I mentioned to the board before, and I know there's some emails going out to the new fire chief stuff, that the fire commission is in need of a vehicle due to an accident sooner than we thought.
mhm.
And I understand there's a couple of Tahoes, retired police Tahoes that are on an auction site right now. Could we find out if we can stop that or pull them from the auction if that's feasible, or?
I think, Chief, didn't Dave talk to you today about the possibility of?
Yeah, Chief Stans and I talked with him. We've got a 2003 Expedition that we could obtain. We're looking to kill two birds with one stone, because that vehicle was also used for the USAR trailers, which are very heavy. It's a Class 4 hitch. So we don't have access to that type of vehicle yet. Possibly in the DPW, if they purchase another vehicle, they may have a vehicle that would be good for us to use, both for the fire inspector and also pulling that trailer. Right now, we have to call either Mundy Township or Burton to gain access to a vehicle in case we need those trailers. So for the short term, I would say if we could use the 2003 Expedition, and then if DPW or we can get access to a vehicle that will tow the trailer, and also for the fire inspector, it would be cheaper that way.
Okay.
But it has to come from the fire commission, okay, to us, I think.
Well, plus they're gonna.
Well, no, I'm,
Yeah,
I understand we're, fire commission's kind of a separate entity, and there's, we've got to discuss that. I was not aware of the USAR trailer, the Tahoe is not gonna pull that. We need a 2500 HD, 3500 pickup to pull that, so, based on information. So the Expedition is not on an auction site yet, that's available to us
Yes, sir.
short term? Okay,
Yep.
all right. then.
It's just basically doing the paperwork so we can gain access to it and have the use of it.
Okay.
So you just want to borrow it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what we, and we had a little discussion about this today, and the police chief was in our meeting as well. What we want to do, I think, when I last received some communication from Chief Stam, is if we, through Larry and through, is Patty Rockefeller the?
She's the chair.
yeah.
Okay, through Larry and Patty, I think we can get this coordinated. We are sort of, we're a majority partner, obviously, in the fire commission, but we gotta kind of work through the protocol of the fire commission to accommodate this. And I think if the board wants to allow Larry well, he already has the authority to represent us, as far as the fire commission goes, between Chief Stam and Patty and Larry and Chief Surveyor, we could probably accommodate this thing.
Actually, I'm confused because Chief Sam doesn't own that vehicle. This is a pool vehicle for the township, okay? It used to be a police vehicle, but it's no longer a police vehicle.
That's correct.
So I don't
it's a
know why,
township pool vehicle.
Actually, I could probably answer that. I was looking at the Tahoes, and then the mechanic also showed the 2003 Expedition.
Right, I understand.
So I probably just assumed it was Chief Stam had access to it.
Right.
So
Yeah, 'cause
that was just a miscommunication.
Because we have another Tahoe that is in the township pool, there used to be a police tower, okay?
Okay.
Not the one that's being sold, but we have 2 cars out, you saw all 3 probably.
Yeah,
You saw the, the Expedition, then there was 2 other towers, one that's on the internet for sale, and then there's another one.
yeah.
And like you said, the Expedition gives you the capabilities to do the towing that you need, so that's.
Well, the Expedition does give you the capability. It won't the suspension won't handle the
But the
trailer.
towers won't either. so.
Yeah, the top hose won't either. That's why I was asking if we can borrow it until we can, either DPW or somebody within the township can have, is either selling a vehicle or they don't need a vehicle that's in decent shape. That way I could have a vehicle for the fire inspector and also a vehicle that I could tow those USAR trailers as well. Or if we have to go outside as well.
Right, but don't we have to, doesn't he have to purchase that or do a lease agreement or something?
Well, we're gonna,
Since it's general fund use, it's not a police vehicle.
yeah, we're gonna have to figure, I mean, we're gonna have to work through the formality of
Right.
how we provide a vehicle for some period of time.
Right.
Because it's not just like you go to our pool and you take care of it.
Right.
But I think we can handle the administration of that if the board's willing to explore that.
And the liability issues are gonna be looked into.
Yeah, the insurance
Yes.
issues, because
Yeah, they have separate insurance and they're separate, as far as that goes, they're separate.
We are aware of the problem and we want to work it out, but it's not going to happen overnight, yeah.
But if the board is interested in giving Larry the authority to
Right.
represent
Mhm.
us as far as our entity is concerned, and then we'll work with Patty and get obviously input from Chief Stam and hopefully accommodate it in some way.
I'm interested in giving him that authority.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna work through Mr. Laddie on this, because I'm not gonna be
No.
making this decision, and nor am I gonna allow the fire commission to make the decision without his input, so I'll be
Absolutely.
glad.
And I talked with Patty as well, and I also talked with Chief Stam. Both of them were positive, or in a positive direction with that, just so you know.
What happens to the vehicle that got wrecked? I mean, is there insurance on that that's gonna
Yes,
replace that?
yes, the insurance company totaled the vehicle, so we will be getting funds for that, so that, we're limited on our funds, so that's why I'm trying to get a reliable vehicle, something that can tow the USAR and also be reliable for the fire inspector at a decent price. So we would be able to cover all the funds.
So when will they give you that money? Is it a slow process or are they already sending the check?
That I'm not sure of. I know what the amount is. It's $8,400 and I think 32 cents. And then we're also going to get a couple $100 as well for something else as well due to the vehicle. So we do have funds, but they're limited. So I want to make sure, like I said, I don't want to go overstepping my bounds and go out and look for a new vehicle when I can't afford it. So.
Okay. So you're getting Larry the, yeah.
If you guys come from doing that, I'll work with
Yeah.
the chief and the fire commission
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Mr. Laddie and David Stam as well.
You bet.
Appropriate,
Yeah.
help everybody out. Okay.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
I'm
Okay.
putting a lot of trust in you, Larry.
Well, we're getting a whole new fleet. Just kidding. Well placed.
Just make sure the liability.
I'm gonna make sure that's covered. They have insurance.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
Sure.
check, make sure that it's
But
covered.
it's not, they don't have the trucks, so that's a tricky situation.
Oh.
Still,
As long as you don't buy a fire truck.
Yeah, right.
okay.
Okay, is there anything, okay, now we're going back to the other,
It's got a plow decision and everything like that.
That's next thing.
you got, you're waiting for
In emergencies.
Yeah, we do, we have Mr. Fanning here, and actually, our fire chief Surveyor will
Yeah.
be a part of that executive session as well, for at least
Yeah.
a portion of it. But you also
the,
have,
you have the discussion on that, what do you want to do about that?
on the what?
On the director.
Yeah, we've gone through the review of the township board agenda for Thursday, and now we're on discussion item, and under item A, we have superintendent search update,
Right.
which, if we could take a moment, I'd like to give you some information and get some feedback from you. by email, I forwarded to you a copy of the state statute that authorizes us to have township superintendent, and also a copy of the original contract that we had with Mr. Donald. And the point of providing the contract was to illustrate that we took specific duties out of the statute and put them in the contract for our superintendent. And you may recall that we also did that with Mr. Edwards as well. I would suggest that we follow the same format when it comes time to create an agreement for a new superintendent. But I wanted you to just have an outline, basically, of all the responsibilities that are possible to be delegated to the superintendent, and know also that you can hold back responsibilities if you deem it appropriate. One of the things that we discussed this morning with Nikki, Chris, and Earl was the idea that we want to have a candidate who's very strong in personnel matters, in human resources, and also has experience and abilities with collective bargaining. We need them to have a very strong understanding of budgets, because we have two fairly complicated budgets here that comprise a significant amount of money. And we want to make sure that they have the ability to run the day-to-day operations of the township. And one of the things that we discussed many years ago when we first endeavored on the superintendent idea was that we would have a supervisor who would serve as a part-time capacity that would represent the township as far as county agencies are concerned and other
The outside.
yeah, exactly, community groups and things like that. Mickey was supposed to be the outside representative, and the superintendent was supposed to cover everything on the inside. And I think through experience, and this is some discussion we had this morning, we found that we really need somebody with a real ability as far as personnel goes. Not just to manage personnel on a day-to-day basis, but to help create policies and to really take a firm role in that regard. And so I think we have covered that in a proposed notice of us requesting resumes and applications. But I think I want to get some input as to whether or not you feel that those are areas that we should stress. I think that if we do decide there are areas to stress, we should include them as highlights in some of the qualifications that we're looking for. As far as qualifications that would be included in an ad, we also talked about the idea of having a minimum bachelor's degree, and also there was discussion about having a strong preference to a master's degree in public administration or a related field, or even a doctorate. So those are, and I said, and I appreciate, let me just run through the steps that we have first. I think I included a proposed request that we would run basically with the Michigan Township Association, the Municipal League, any professional associations they recommend. And also, surprisingly, I get a kick out of this, but we got apparently tremendous response from Monster.com, at least one or two of our requests. And if Clearzoning has any recommendations for any associations that we can run the ad. The idea is to get it out all over the country, to be pretty specific and pretty high level as far as our expectations go. We're not committing necessarily off the bat to any sort of compensation. And then the idea would be, after an appropriate amount of time, we would get back whatever responses we receive, either by email or by mail. And then we would have a committee that would be responsible for going through the initial documents that we receive, and then hopefully figure out a process that we can whittle down basically candidates to have the board as a whole interview the candidates and when that would proceed. And so that's kind of what we talked about thumbnail-wise, but backing up to the very beginning, I think the whole thing starts out with what should we put in the ad, where should we run the ad, and how long should we give for responses, and who's going to review those responses initially. Scott, you had a question, I think, that related to the ad.
No, you were asking for input on, do we think those are the things we're looking for? I would concur. I think personnel, budgeting, labor. I think also when we're looking at, whether or not they have a bachelor's or master's or doctorate, I guess I would like to look at experience and weight that probably just as heavily. That if we find we find somebody that's been
Right.
successful in this position elsewhere. And I guess one thing that, a fourth attribute that I would say that I'd like is somebody with some vision. That maybe that somebody's taking, somebody that can look at a PUD like we have,
Yeah.
Trillium, and say, hey, I want to work with that developer and help flesh this thing out and get this thing moving. Somebody can be a salesman or salesperson,
Yeah, right.
saleswoman for our township.
Right.
Put vision in the ad, that's a good word. That is, that's very good.
Or proven, ability to have vision and to,
Well, they can demonstrate,
Right.
projects that they have,
Right.
that they can relate to, that they've done. Yeah, and anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just put in my 2 cents. I'm gonna say, I agree, experience weighs heavily, and I want experience, but I think we need to put it at a minimum of a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Minimum.
Wow,
That would,
we agree again.
that's
Because that's what I was gonna say.
Okay, scared me a lot. I want somebody that's strongly, got a lot of organizational skills, somebody that's got a lot of negotiation skills with contract stuff. And we've kind of done this with Keith to an extent. And Keith had his areas of expertise, and Donald too. I want somebody that can really manage the township,
Right.
fully. And I'm not going to use you as an example. You're doing a fine job as a superintendent, or supervisor, excuse me. You know this township inside and out, but the disadvantage after an election is anybody can run for that office.
That's exactly.
And I've seen in some of our surrounding communities, somebody with a chip on their shoulder about what
Well, it
the
has an
board has
agenda.
done to
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
has decided, well, I'm gonna run for office and fix that, and I don't want that. I want a
Well,
lot
there's
of
a
defined-
continuity because you can lose the whole board in one
Correct.
election.
Mhm.
So you have to have a continuity, and that's why we went to the EDI.
Correct, and I agree, and I remember you were on the committee that
Yeah.
pursued that, and I thank you for that work. So I definitely want somebody that's gonna be able to sit down and plan a future for us.
as far as the time period goes, we're talking a month. How long have we had the ads out for some of the other positions? Does anybody recall for the
Well, if it's
finance?
internal, it goes like 10 days, okay, but if on this, well, the last time we went for a manager, we went through MML, MML, and it took.
NTA, but yeah, it took a long time. But
Yeah.
the thing you have to keep in mind was we're gonna have basically an ad cycle.
Yeah, yeah.
And their ad cycles are gonna be staggered a little bit.
Yeah.
Who's gonna look into that? You or Earl said something about looking into how long?
I think Earl said.
Was it Earl? Did you say that today?
Yeah, because I was
See how long
thinking, I was
people
thinking 2 to 3 weeks, because, if you go to a month, I don't think we need a month, because everybody's on the internet, and everybody's looking, so I think within 2 to 3 weeks, we could get it done.
Well, I would say, I mean, the sooner the better, but we wanna be able to hit a full ad cycle.
Yeah.
In the publications and whoever we send.
Well, a lot of the publications are electronic, so I don't think we have to be in print, I think we just need to be electronically, because most people aren't even looking at magazines, they're looking at as you said, they hit Monster, which is an electronic publication, not a paper publication.
Yeah.
What if we picked a date that we said we want to have these by this time now, whether
Well, by the end of this
publications a month,
month.
or, because they're gonna overlap, and they're all
Yeah,
gonna be.
just by the end of January.
Ooh, that's really
Oh,
That's too
fast.
close. Why?
The ad isn't even
First
really
If
written.
if there's a electronic
First
publication,
announcement.
they come out, they can come out monthly.
Maybe I'll say the same thing.
You're not getting stuff, monster.com will pop up immediately, but
Yeah.
I don't know if these trade
Right.
organizations are, I mean,
No.
I think you're gonna wanna give yourself a little bit of time to let it mature, and
Yeah.
get it out there.
I don't know though, sometimes when you read an ad and you
Right.
see that it's there 2 weeks later or something, you think, oh, they can't find anybody. Or, oh, I could apply for that, nobody else wants it.
Most of the ones that you,
Yes.
I'm going then you would be advertised.
Oh, these guys know something.
I'm actually just gonna relay something Jill just said, because I thought it was a great point. A lot of times you may not be looking for jobs, you may not be going online, but you get the trade publication monthly.
Yeah.
You open it up and you may see it and go, wow, that's really close by. I'm thinking about that. So I think it is good to get in the prep if you can, just because you may catch some people that are really good. that
Not
aren't necessarily
looking.
checking the
And I
ins.
want to get people that aren't necessarily looking for a job.
Yeah.
And we also want to do this one time. We
Yeah.
want to cast the
Right.
net very wide.
Mhm.
And if we're going to make a mistake, we should make it on the mistake of getting
More
a job.
resumes.
You know,
Yeah,
I agree, we
because
don't have to be stale listing, you know, we,
And the trade publications are things that you do read if you're in.
Two little things that I have. One is I would modify it to an accredited university, because you don't want just a diploma mill, so you can buy something off the internet. And the second might be farther, the next step out, but at the police department, we used this company, and they handled all the interviews until the final selection. And the guy was very, very good, Career Directions. Dr. McGinn is the owner. And I don't know if we're considering anything like that to narrow down the pool.
let's talk about it. 'Cause we haven't had a discussion about that. And by the way, I had a brief conversation with the chief. I guess you guys use Dr. McGinn
Right.
in the, does he do work for general municipal?
He's done work for Fortune 500 companies. All-
I think Rod's got some experience.
Yeah, well, no, I actually just was talking with a city manager recently, and the MML actually offers that service, I believe, for townships and for cities and villages. They have a search
Yeah.
function where they will do some of that interviews. They may be worth talking to as well.
I heard that this Dr. McGinn can look at people and tell, and look at their paperwork, look at everything, and be able to tell you, this person is like this, and these are the issues you're gonna have with this person, and so on and so forth, and that would be very helpful to know. Somebody has that kind of,
I think that's, as you say, that's later on when you get to your finalist interview.
Well, that would be something, so we would we want to, well, do we have confidence that, and I think we do, that we can describe what we want? We know the
Exactly.
job really well. We also know the kind of person that we want, and I think that we can at least, and we'll know fairly quickly what kind of response we're getting. Maybe we can launch the ad, and also at the same time consult with MML to see what sort of process they have, and then make contact with the company that Dr. Reardon had indicated, and also with MML, and see, and get a comparison of what kind of service they can offer us and how much it will cost. And then see, before we move on to the next step, if we want to engage one of these companies.
Yeah, I do know that Dr. McGinn, he will take our qualifications and then he devises his tests based upon what we're looking for. And then he'll have an in-basket, and he'll normally puts together a fairly comprehensive panel of people to conduct interviews with him.
So there's no, you don't see any harm in us beginning the initial request?
Casting the net for applications.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause-
So we still haven't decided on the time. I think it
Well,
probably.
you got Roland, you got
Yeah.
Mr. Bennett. Well, you got everybody with questions. So.
I'll take my turn after they're all done.
Go ahead, Earl.
Well, I think the item that you presented, and with a couple modifications we already talked about, I think we've got enough information on the one you presented. You can say a minimum of bachelor's, but we preferred the master's in public administration, and of course you updated the vision. So everything is there, set. I think we're okay there. And then just post it. If you want to run a little bit farther, then we can get our applications back, and then, because we've looked at those applications numerous times through all, 3 times that we did DPW and everything else, that I think we can sort it down. But the key is you've already got the essence right here,
I think
and
that,
approve that and get it out
I
there.
think the essence is there.
Right.
I'd like Dave to tweak it a little bit with some of the
Yeah,
language we
yeah.
gave him, because I think
Yeah.
experience is also right up there for me, but.
Me too.
Well, it says experience right in there. Do you have
Yeah,
the?
but I think we need to
And you-
strengthen
lot-
that a
it's
little
really-
bit.
We can do that.
The one thing that, and I'm familiar with people like the doctor, Dr. Jude recommended, but the one advantage we might consider with MML is that they probably have done these searches for other municipalities. and they know what people are out there, and, you know, I've known of associations that do that kind of thing, and they'll say, hey, there is a position, you know, somebody, we've got some people that applied for this other position that may be interested in yours.
Yeah.
You know, do you want us to contact them, kind of thing too, so they may have a database of people that are already interested in looking.
Well, we definitely plan on going
Yeah.
through, you know, using MML and MTA.
Yeah. They could post that
Comment.
online.
My comment is, can you put in there, women and minorities encouraged to apply? Because I'm serious about this. I just feel like we should open it up to women.
Well, I think it is already.
It's
Yeah,
already
but
open.
these people don't, I don't see anything wrong with putting it in there. By law, don't you have to?
Grand Blanc Township is an equal opportunity employer, period.
Yeah.
There you go. Put that in there. One woman, it's an equal.
Yeah, we're not, I mean, we're gonna be equal.
Right,
We're
yeah.
not trying to,
Yeah.
we're not slanting one way or the other, right?
Right.
We're an equal opportunity employer.
All right.
I know what you're
All right,
hoping.
okay, bad day for me with this stuff. I read that contract and I saw all those his, and it just, I thought, oh my God.
My comments on the qualifications, again, I'm open to putting, you know, experience preferred, or even narrowing it down to experience in certain fields. I think we should keep the qualifications with a minimum of a bachelor's required. Because if you put in there a master's preferred, you might have some very qualified individuals who
That's the
have a
option.
bachelor's degree that say, they're not going to give me a chance.
Yeah,
They're not
I'm
apply.
with that.
It
I
says
go with
minimum
that.
bachelor's right there, okay?
Yeah, but I know there's some discussion where they're a master's preferred.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it. That's why I'm making that comment.
You wanna not,
I want to not put
well,
that.
I think we're gonna add accredited, I think we need to be.
That I agree with, and from an accredited university, so you don't
Yeah.
get one of these, you know,
I would
Yeah.
concur with their.
online by
Mail order,
diploma,
yeah.
but just put in there a minimum of a bachelor's, and that way, anybody with more than a bachelor's is free to apply,
Mhm.
but anybody who has a bachelor's won't feel
They shouldn't apply.
they shouldn't apply, correct, or are already beaten out.
I don't want to interrupt, but I'm getting a pretty strong agreement from Scott and Larry. Is there consensus
I agree with
to
that.
not
Mhm.
include
Yeah.
preference for
Yeah,
master's?
I agree with that.
I'd like to have a preference, because I think that's who should be running them. I think it should be an MPA.
There's 2-1,
I kind of go with Earl myself,
2.
and that's unusual.
What's your preference? You guys are pretty split on this.
My preference?
Yeah, you're split on whether or not you want to mention a master's degree, or, I mean, whether you want to highlight the educational part.
If you put, as I say, as Larry said, I see a lot of the experienced people that only have a bachelor's.
The scale just tipped a little bit toward,
I
Well,
kind of want to change my mind.
It
but-
does say or close related field and at least experience in municipal government. So it does catch, everything's already in here. The catch-alls are all here, okay?
Here's my plea to Chris,
Okay, don't change my mind.
is by not including the master's degree, we're casting the net much wider.
And the other thing is, now see, this is where I see the advantage of saying minimum of a bachelor's, because a lot of people with a bachelor's would look at that and think, well, I'm not qualified, that's the least they're gonna take. But somebody who's been doing this for 20 or 25 years might not have that master's degree, and that'd be a very good
Mhm.
candidate.
That's fine.
So I'm willing to go along with minimum of bachelor's.
Minimum bachelor's, yeah. Okay?
Well, I'm still on the outs, so.
We got it done, so Dave, you got your direction.
All right, well, okay.
Yeah, Jude, you don't know how much I want to agree with you because I don't think that's ever happened, that I would agree with both of you in the same minute.
we're gonna tweak the ad, we're
Yep.
gonna reach out to MML, MTA, and again, associations that they recommend. We're also, I want to start the ball rolling with making contact with the company that Dr. Reardon made reference to,
Mhm.
and also talk to MML about a more in-depth
Right.
review process and assistance that they can provide. We'll send out, and by the way, I'm working on this with a really interesting, we decided we're an interesting group today with Chris, Earl, and Mickey, and that we've got a lot of different points of view covered. And so we're gonna directly draft this thing. We'll send out copies to you all to take a look at it, to object if you find it necessary or make suggestions. But we're gonna start this process like toward the end of the week.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I, just a quick thing, is that I would like that we limit the duties at the right time, not right this second, because I think the last person had too much authority and too much leeway, and I would like to focus that a little more.
Yeah, you could just look at that contract and make your comments on that, so that
Right.
we get it ahead of time. I think that's a great idea.
You know, I think that's a great point. We had limited, we had success, but we also had some difficulties. And there are traits with two different people. Donald and Keith had very different personalities, and they did the same job in the same place. And sometimes they had the same reactions to things, and sometimes they had the same problems. And I think if we could look at that and try to figure out how to avoid that in the future, we might want to do that, because there were patterns that kind of came up.
Well, and I haven't been on the board long enough to know this, but it kind of appeared that as we cut different, or didn't replace certain people, it kind of all fell on our township manager's plate.
Or delegated, if you will.
Whether it was, not having a plan or not having anybody to deal with, ordinance enforcement.
DPW.
We didn't have a DPW director, so I think to avoid that, we need to make sure when we have a vacancy that we look at
Yeah,
filling that and not throw it on their plate.
exactly.
So that circles back to what Dr. Reardon said. I mean, I think we've got to be specific about what their duties are and what they are for their own sake.
Yeah.
I don't want to drag this out, I want to kind of wrap up quickly, but I agree with totally, but I want to be careful. I don't want to narrow down what the responsibilities of this person are going to be before I interview this person, because it's going to vary greatly depending on who applies for the job, what I want to trust them with.
Right.
So,
Well, hopefully, we would be able to trust the person with these few things we're asking for, run the.
that's my hope, but before I dial in the language, I want to know who it's for.
That's all there is on this topic,
Yeah.
and we've got an executive session
Exactly.
regarding the IAFF collective bargaining agreement.
Motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss IAFF negotiations.
Support.
Could you roll call?
Roll call, Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mrs. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Guzik.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Reardon.
Yes.